My name is Leo, and my younger brother is Zach. This all happened years ago, and I've never told anyone what we went through, until now. Back then, I was 18, and Zach was 16. It was the dead of summer, and Zach and I were bored out of our minds and looking for literally anything to do. We'd heard about this app called Randonautica from some online posts. People were finding weird locations, abandoned places, sometimes disturbing stuff. The whole concept was that you set an intention, and the app generated GPS coordinates based on some quantum random number generator. Most people were setting harmless intentions like adventure or surprise or treasure. But Zach and I... shit. I don't know what we were thinking. We were probably stoned and definitely stupid. Zach suggested we set our intention to something dark. Something about mortality. I should have said no right then. Should have suggested literally anything else. But I was mind-numbingly bored. Plus, we were morbidly curious about what kind of place it would send us to. The app spat out coordinates about 40 minutes from where we lived. We hopped in my car and drove there, expecting maybe an old graveyard or abandoned building, something obviously connected to our intention but relatively harmless. Instead, it brought us to this abandoned funeral home in the middle of absolutely nowhere. We remained sitting in the car and just staring at the building in front of us. The place was massive and completely isolated, sitting by itself on what must have been 50 acres of overgrown land. The building looked like it had been closed for decades, paint peeling off the siding, windows boarded up, parking lot cracked and full of weeds. There was still a faded sign out front, but the name was too weathered to read clearly. Zach was already getting uncomfortable. "Leo, this place gives me the creeps." I agreed, but we'd driven all this way and honestly, I was morbidly curious. Zach suggested we use Randonautica one more time while we were here, set our intention to something different, maybe mystery or hidden or something like that, just to see what would happen. Biggest mistake of our lives. The new coordinates were only about 200 yards away, deeper into the woods behind the funeral home. We parked next to the building and walked around to the back of the property. There was this overgrown area where the cleared land met a dense forest. Old rusted chain. Link fencing marked what used to be the property line, but it was broken down in several places. Our coordinates were leading us past the fence line, into the woods. As we were pushing through the undergrowth and fallen branches, Zach pointed ahead. "Leo, there's something back there." Deeper in the trees, maybe 100 yards from the funeral home, was this large structure. It was a barn, old and weathered, but much bigger than you'd expect to find randomly in the woods. The roof was partially collapsed on one end, and the wooden siding was rotting and covered in moss. It looked like it had been abandoned for years, but there was something about it that felt wrong somehow. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to turn around and leave. But Zach and I had this thing where we didn't want to seem scared in front of each other. Stupid pride, you know? "We've come this far," I said, though my voice was shaking. "Let's just get close enough to see what it is." We started walking toward the structure, and the closer we got, the more wrong everything felt. The air seemed thicker somehow. There was this smell, not quite decay, not quite chemicals, but something organic and unpleasant. Like something had died in there a long time ago. We were maybe 15 feet away from the barn when we heard it. I still don't know how to describe the sound that came from inside that structure. It wasn't human, I'm absolutely certain of that. But it wasn't like any animal I've ever heard either. It started as this low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from deep underground. But then it shifted into this high, pitched shriek that made my teeth hurt. Like something was in agony but also furious at the same time. The sound lasted maybe 5 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Zach and I looked at each other in pure terror, and then we both turned and ran. I mean full out sprinting back through the woods, crashing through branches and undergrowth, not caring about the noise we were making. We just needed to get away from whatever had made that noise. As we were running, we heard something large crashing out of the barn behind us. Heavy footsteps, much heavier than any human, started pounding through the forest, chasing us. We were too terrified to look back, but I could hear branches snapping and trees being pushed aside as something massive pursued us through the woods. Zach was gasping for breath beside me, and I could tell he heard it too. Whatever was behind us was gaining ground, moving through the forest with a coordination that suggested it knew these woods better than we did. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the keys in the ignition. As we were pulling out of the parking lot, Zach suddenly grabbed my shoulder. "Leo, don't look back, but check your rearview mirror." I adjusted my mirror, and I swear to God, there were these 2 red points of light visible at the tree line behind the funeral home. Not flashlights. These were glowing red eyes, and we both knew it. Something tall was standing at the edge of the woods, watching us with those burning red eyes. I floored the gas pedal, and we sped down that empty road as fast as my car could go. We'd made it maybe half a mile when we heard it again, that same horrific roar scream, but much louder this time. It echoed through the trees and seemed to follow us down the road. Zach went completely white, and I think I might have screamed. The sound was so loud it felt like it was coming from right behind our car, like whatever made it was chasing us. We drove home in complete silence, both of us too shaken to speak. Neither of us talked about what happened for weeks afterward. Eventually, we tried to convince ourselves it was just our imagination, that we'd psyched ourselves out with the creepy app and the isolated location. But sometimes Zach will bring it up. When we are alone, he'll ask if I remember the sound that thing made or if I think about those red eyes in the trees. And every time, I get this chill down my spine, because I know we encountered something that shouldn't exist within our world. I deleted Randonautica that same night. Never used it again, never will. But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed longer, or if we'd been brave enough to actually approach that barn. Actually, no, I don't wonder about that. Because deep down, I think I know what we would have found, and I'm grateful we ran when we did. Edit. For those asking about the location, absolutely not sharing that information. I don't want anyone else going there. Trust me, by me not telling you where the location is, I am doing you a favor. Let me give you some advice. Delete Randonautica from your phone and don't give it a second thought. The following is the story about the scariest night of my life. It involves myself and my girlfriend, Abby. My name is Preston. This happened a while back, but after reading a number of stories similar to mine, I am ready to talk about what we experienced that still gives both of us nightmares. Abby and I were up late one Friday night just hanging out at my place. We were both able to sleep in the next day. And around 11:30 p.m. we started talking about weird stories and creepy stuff we'd seen online. That's when Abby brought up Randonautica. "Have you heard about this app?" she asked, already pulling it up on her phone. I hadn't, so she explained the whole concept. You set an intention, and it generates GPS coordinates based on some quantum algorithm. People were finding all kinds of strange places and sometimes disturbing stuff. We're from a small town in rural West Virginia, deep in Appalachian country. Both of us knew every road, every house, and every back trail for miles around. So we decided to set our intention to anomalous, just to see if it would take us somewhere we'd never been before. I didn't expect much. Maybe some old mining equipment or an abandoned trailer we'd somehow missed in all our years of exploring these mountains. The app spat out GPS coordinates about 35 minutes from town. As we were driving there, following increasingly narrow and winding mountain roads. Abby looked up the exact location on Google Maps. "Preston, this is weird," she said, frowning at her phone. "There's no address here, no street name. It's just coordinates pointing to the middle of the woods." "Maybe it's just a glitch," I said. "Let's go see what's actually there." We took the nearest road to the coordinates and parked on the shoulder. There were no other cars around, no streetlights, just dense Appalachian forest pressing in from both sides. The kind of woods that have been here since before white settlers arrived, dark and thick with undergrowth. Abby was already feeling unsettled. "I don't like this, Preston. This feels weird." But I was curious now and honestly didn't want to seem scared in front of her. "Let's just see what's here. It's probably nothing." We used our phones as flashlights and started walking into the trees. The woods were dead quiet. No night birds, no insects, just the sound of our footsteps on dead leaves. After about 10 minutes of hiking through increasingly thick forest, we saw a structure in the distance. "What is that?" Abby whispered. As we got closer, I could make out the shape. "I think it's a house." But when we reached it, we saw it was an abandoned house like nothing I'd ever seen in our area. Boarded up windows, paint peeling off the siding, and shingles missing from the roof. The whole structure looked like it had been rotting in these woods for decades. The strangest part was the front door. Someone had spray painted the word "Just Run" in large red letters across it. We stood there for a moment, both of us trying to decide if we should find a way inside. Abby grabbed my arm. "I hate this, Preston. I want to go back to the car." I was torn. Part of me was scared too, but part of me was fascinated. As we stood there debating, we heard what sounded like heavy furniture being dragged across the floor inside the house. Then we heard 3 deliberate knocks coming from inside. "Absolutely not," Abby said, backing away from the door. "We're going back to the car right now." I was about to agree when her phone buzzed with a notification from Randonautica. "New location alert. Follow." "What the hell?" I said, looking at her screen. "Does the app normally do that?" As we were staring at the notification, the front door slowly creaked open. We both shined our flashlights inside. The house was empty, just a dilapidated interior with disgusting floorboards covered in dirt and debris. There was an old wood-burning stove in one corner, and graffiti spray painted all over the walls and floor. It looked like squatters had been using the place. "See?" I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. "There's nobody in there. It's just an old abandoned house." Against my better judgment, I took a step inside. My phone's flashlight illuminated more graffiti on the far wall. "It's too late," painted in the same red letters. I turned to show Abby, but she was gone. "Abby?" I called out, my voice echoing in the empty house. "Abby?" I heard her scream from what sounded like the back of the house. Following the sound, I found where she had fallen through the rotted floorboards into some kind of dirt basement or crawl space. "I'm okay," she called up, though she was clearly crying and panicking. "Just get me out of here." As I reached down to help her up, my flashlight illuminated something that made my blood freeze. There was a wooden plank down in the crawl space with more spray-painted text. "You should not be where you don't belong. Don't let them find you here." I pulled Abby out of the hole and we both ran. No discussion, no looking back, just pure terror driving us through that house and out the front door. We made it about 15 feet from the house when the front door slammed shut behind us with a bang that echoed through the entire forest. We didn't stop running until we reached my car, both of us gasping and exhausted. I reached for my keys and felt my pocket. Empty. "Shit," I said, checking my other pockets frantically. "Damn it." "What?" Abby asked, still trying to catch her breath. "My keys. They aren't in my pocket. They must have fallen out when I was pulling you up." I pulled on the door handle. The car was locked. This was the worst possible situation. We were stranded in the middle of nowhere with no way to get home. I was considering whether I had the courage to go back to that house and look for my keys, when we heard it. A blood-curdling scream came from somewhere deep in the woods. Not human. Something wild and predatory that raised every hair on my body. Then we started hearing movement in the forest around us. Branches breaking, leaves rustling, and footsteps that seemed to be coming from multiple directions at once. "Preston," Abby whispered, grabbing onto my arm. "There's more than one thing out there." She was right. The sounds were coordinated, like whatever was in those woods was surrounding us. Then we heard yips and howls echoing from different locations around the forest. Not coyotes or dogs, but something else. Something that sounded almost intelligent in the way the calls responded to each other. We were running out of time. In complete desperation, I grabbed a rock and smashed my back window. The sound of breaking glass seemed to trigger more howling from the woods, closer now. I reached through and unlocked the doors. "Get in!" I shouted to Abby. Fortunately, I was driving an old 2004 Oldsmobile. I'd learned to hotwire these older cars years ago when I took some mechanic courses at the nearby community college. I exposed the wiring and got to work. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the wires. The next few minutes felt like a lifetime. Hands down, they were the most stressful and frightening of my life. Howls and yips were getting closer, and I could hear heavy footsteps crashing through the underbrush toward us. Abby was crying and looking out the windows, trying to spot whatever was hunting us in the darkness. "Hurry, Preston! Please hurry!" Finally, the engine roared to life just as something large moved through our headlight beams at the tree line. I only caught a glimpse, but it was big enough and fast enough to make me floor the gas pedal immediately. I drove out of there like a bat out of hell, taking those mountain curves faster than I should have, both of us too terrified to speak until we reached the main road. We deleted Randonautica that same night and agreed never to talk about what happened. We didn't stick to that second part. The next day, I had to make up a story at the repair shop to why I hotwired my own car. I was able to get my key replaced, because obviously I was never going back to that house to look for my lost key. Now, years later, sometimes Abby will bring up that spray-painted message in the crawl space. "You should not be where you don't belong. Don't let them find you here." Like whatever was in that house had been expecting us. Like the app had been guiding us there on purpose. I still don't know what we encountered in those woods, and I don't want to know. But I'm convinced there's something genuinely evil about that app. Something that uses our curiosity against us. I really wish we'd never downloaded that damn app, because whatever we ran into that night has lingered with us. Something neither of us can seem to shake off.